What's going on, workforce? Brian here, and let's talk about that live letter. Now, there is a lot that we have to cover, and I'm going to do my best. It was a 4-hour live letter, so we're going to try to condense it into multiple videos. So let's just do this thing. So have you always wanted to summon Bahamut in the world of Final Fantasy XIV? Well, good news. Summoners. I'm going to be showing some of the footage obviously behind me right now as I talk, namely so that you guys can hopefully have that experience that we had while watching the live letter. There's a lot of information that's covered, so how we're going to break this up on the channel is this. This is going to be a summary of the live letter. Now, there are PvP changes that they're making, and so we're going to make a separate video for PvP and a summary of those actions and what's happening with PvP elsewhere. That way, if you're not really interested in the PvP system, you know, we're not going to just have you sit here for like 3 hours to cover everything that's happened. But if you are interested in PvP, and I would recommend you do go check out that video, you can go find out the PvP summary of the live letter in that separate video. Now, for the specific job changes, we're going to try to talk about a lot of that here, but more or less it's probably going to fall into a separate job video. We're going to summarize a lot here, but to get into the detail and really focus in on the job and really what that means, or at least what we think it means for the job in Stormblood, we're going to have job-specific videos coming out as quickly as we can make them. I know it's a lot, but this was a lot of information, and there's still probably going to be plenty of things to discuss, digest, to theorize about. So if I make any misstatements, please, forgive me. This was obviously translated. This was obviously a long time. So I'm just going to go over my notes, and we're going to talk about everything that just happened. So to start, at the live letter, they talked about reasons why that they wanted to make these changes, and it fell into several categories. First, the 3.0 system is overly complex. The second reason was there were too many job actions, and there was just not enough space. Adding more actions would only make the problem worse. There was a huge overemphasis on status icon management. So those little buffs with timers that you're always having to watch instead of the AoEs. There was a huge gap between core and casual players. And then there was a lack of synergy between the jobs. And they gave examples that warrior and ninjas really worked well together, but monk kind of always felt left out. So what are some of the principal changes? Additional actions are gone. What is an additional action? It's the cross-roll action system. That is completely gone. Now, we kind of knew it, but the question was, would they keep it and then we'd have the cross-roll? No. So cross-roll is all there is. And the roles are actually divided as following. Tanks, healers, melee DPS, ranged DPS, and casters. So that actually kind of helps answer that one question that we've had since they've announced it. Another change that is actually made is that you don't have to go level additional classes to unlock your job. And the reason is again, no real cross-class system. Everything's cross-roll. It just kind of felt like it was an obstacle to getting into your job. And a lot of players, especially new players, might not understand that as well. So then they go and actually show off the cross-roll system and showing it by the jobs. Now, everything was in Japanese, and they did translate some of the skills. So I'm going to try to cover it, but again, we're probably going to learn more as the weeks go by. Black Mage, Summoner, and Red Mage all share the caster's role, which is really cool because that's where you have your swift cast. They have a new ability that's kind of like Virus, but a little bit different, and I didn't get the spelling of it, so I apologize. We'll get more details on that soon. But that's just an example. The cool thing that, at least in my opinion, when seeing this is that there's a lot of choices, but you only get 5. So where we've never really kind of had like some real hard decisions, it seems like they might be giving us those systems where maybe you want to take Swiftcast, but maybe you don't. Maybe there's a skill that's going to be better for you, and that's what's going to be exciting. I'm sure that at some point there's going to be some meta that says skill A is better than skill B, or this set of 5 is always going to beat that set of 5. But with the volume of actions that they've actually showed off, it could prove very interesting and also very difficult to find that perfect build. I don't know. I mean, obviously we'll know more in the next 6 months, in the next year, being saying like, okay, but that also means that they can always make certain skill adjustments to kind of make skills have that weight that I'm hoping they have. So some other examples is casters are going to get an ability called Erase that just removes detrimental effects from you. So that also adds a little bit of that support to that ability. Now I don't know if it's only going to let you erase a bad ability from like a party member, or if it actually lets you take something off yourself. Either way, I think it's a pretty cool ability. Mana Shift is another example where you can give MP to somebody else. They did say Raging Strikes has been removed, but it's being replaced with an ability called Diversion. This gets a little bit complex because they were saying Raging Strikes and Quelling Strikes, so those abilities might still be technically with the ranged DPS, but casters don't have access to them, and now they have this ability called Diversion, which seems to be doing what both the Raging Strikes and Quelling Strikes did, but don't quote me on it. So for actions that are removed, like Bloodbath and all that, you're going to see them as grayed out icons with that slash, and this is going to give you the ability to go ahead and figure out what actions are no more, so you can replace them with either their new counterparts or with the abilities that came in their absence. Whether it replaces them one-to-one or not, we'll have to see. So they also then showed off some tank roll actions, like an AoE Provoke, Reprisal. That's been moved to the roll actions. A lot of really cool options, in my opinion. They added the stun to the roll action, which, in my mind, and they talked about Paladin, makes Paladin almost a stunning machine because they've got the shield bash and the low blow kick. So the low blow is off the global cooldown and has that cooldown, obviously, but then for Paladin, it's got the shield bash, so they're going to be a stun machine if that's the case. And there's also some jobs like melee DPS and Dragoon who will also get Diversion. It's not that that ability can't be also used elsewhere. I thought that was really cool. And for anybody who's wondering, Goad is also now a cross-roll ability. This adds a lot of versatility and utility to the other melee DPSs if you choose to take it. Again, you can only have 5 of these, and there's more than 5 to choose from, which I think that makes it interesting. It totally makes it way more interesting than what the additional actions ended up being at this point in time. So I'm really looking forward to it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and let's have that conversation. This is awesome. Okay, so let's talk about healers. We talked about cross-roll, and since we don't have all the specific actions, we're going to have to do a deeper dive, obviously at a later point. Things like Bard has no cast times, and so does Machinist. So those are movable jobs now. So anybody who really hated having to stand still and be a bow mage, welcome back. We're glad to have you. 2.0 was great. 3.0 kind of, a lot of people didn't really like it. I myself included. My wife plays a bard, and so she's really thrilled to be able to be on the move again. Healer's damage is going to be based off of mind. That's incredible. Now, what does that mean for cleric stance? Well, it's cross roll, and instead of being a stance and meaning that you stay in it, it's just going to be a boost to your DPS output for, I think, 15 seconds. So it still is going to exist. You can choose to take it or not, but your base damage is going to be calculated off of mind. So you're like, what does that really mean? Well, the issue is that cleric stance swapped your int and your mind stat. And so for healers, when you would swap it, that's how you would output your DPS. In this case, you don't necessarily have to have that swap because your DPS is calculated off of your mind stat, which is what your healing is calculated off of. So you're going to be able to hit naturally harder with any spell. And that's good news in my opinion. Now, you can choose again to take that additional boost with cleric stance and have added DPS, but there's also some other options that you can choose to have that are cross-roll. An ability like Rescue is also cross-roll, and what that does is it draws somebody to your side. Again, this is optional. Rescue is optional, so it's going to be interesting to see if people feel like it should be required. Now, it's a really good ability to say, hey, get out of that bad, you weren't paying attention, or maybe I can save you. But again, not everybody might take it. In fact, I wonder if it's going to be something that the community feels that healers should have. This is all going to lead to a lot of debate and a lot of discussion. So I'd love to know your thoughts, namely with Rescue, in the comments below. The fact that it also isn't required, that it's a roll. And what about the mind stat? What about the damage? Do you feel this is the right change? Do you feel like this is going to make healers too simple? Honestly, I felt like healing in Final Fantasy XIV is the hardest role to do. In fact, it went, the easiest was tanking, even though there was that level of confidence that you needed to have. Then it was DPS, and then the hardest was healing, because you had so much that you had to manage. And if everything went wrong, it was always your fault, so there was always that added pressure. Anyway, they covered a lot here, and especially as it relates to the different jobs, we're going to try to get into the job-specific information in their own separate video, so that way we don't just take up hours and hours of your time here. So then they showed off the job gauges, talking about the job-specific UI and how each job has its own UI and its own mechanic that goes along with it. Something like Sword Oath and Shield Oath obviously has a visual respect, but then Paladins have this concept of oath points or whatever, so that as they use these abilities that it fills up, and then they can use abilities that spend that those points. Same thing goes for Warrior. Gone is Wrath, and instead Inner Beast is this constant stat that keeps filling up as you use actions, and then you can use those points to execute certain actions. So certain actions outside of TP will use the inner beast points that they displayed. And again, the UI is showing you this bar as well as what stance you're in, and if you're not in a stance, it's going to be very clear and apparent. So the job-specific UI for Black Mage, Bard, all of that we're going to have to cover in their own videos because some of them have some interesting mechanics. So they showed off like Red Mage, showing you a balance between the white and black magic as you fill that up, and then eventually trying to keep that balance so you can execute really powerful abilities. So, so there's a lot there, and just seeing these screens with these job-specific UIs is just a lot to wonder, like, hey, how is this going to work? Now, the thing for me, and the thing that caught me off guard, was I was, in my mind, expecting something way more intense. But it's just these little, obviously UIs that you can add and increase, and you can set them wherever you want them to go, and you can increase or decrease them in size. So if it's something that is very valuable to you, you might want to make it really big and prominent. But if you feel like you don't necessarily need it, or maybe the job doesn't require it as deeply, well, then it's not going to play as big of a part. And the other cool thing about the job-specific UI, that as you level and get more abilities, you get to add on to the job-specific UI. An example of Black Mage was, at first you're just going to have like ice and fire, but when you get Enochian and those other abilities, it adds and makes the job UI more complex, essentially. So it adds like an orb in the center and adds a crystal at the bottom. And then it talks about how you can effectively balance your abilities and use the job-specific UI to your advantage. And so Yoshi P, obviously as a main Black Mage, spent a lot of time showing this off. And speaking of Black Mage, so Enochian can still fall off, but it will stay on as long as you have either fire or ice aspected. So Transpose became real important, and it showed him that he could use Transpose to keep bouncing between ice and fire without having it fall off at all, thus keeping his Enochian up. And using his Enochian, he was able to build out his, I guess, Thunder stat, and was able to execute this one ability called Foul. And that was just this real powerful hit. And that was where they were talking about the difference between the core and the casual player, that the system in and of itself would reward you with being able to use this ability called Foul, which is going to do a lot more damage, thus obviously rewarding you for playing the role right, bouncing between ice and fire and using and keeping Enochian up. So about those abilities, as it relates to Black Mage, as it relates to White Mage, abilities that are evolutions of themselves will now stack and essentially be replaced. So the example is Stone 1, Stone 2, Stone 3, and a new ability, Stone 4, will all be overridden. So you'll start with Stone, and at the end, you'll have Stone 4. No need to have 1, 2, or 3 on your hotbar separately. In fact, it will auto level and auto de-level if you're in level synced content. So if you're in level 50 or level 60 content synced, well, then Stone 3 would be what it is, or Stone 2 would be what you have in that position. So the icon itself, the action itself, is something that's auto leveling. Now, they're introducing Thunder 4. So we were thinking, well, maybe they're just going to go with one Thunder. And what it is that Thunder 1 and Thunder 3, Thunder 1 becomes Thunder 3. And what they're doing with Thunder 2 is they're making it an AoE Thunder, and Thunder 4 is also an AoE Thunder. And here's the biggest gripe I have with that. I wish they would just have Thunder 1 and 2, and Thunder 2 being the new, Thunder 3 would be what Thunder 3 is today, and Thunder 2 and Thunder 4 being Thundiga, or something of that nature, implying that it's a different ability. The numbers being that 1 and 3 are single target, and 2 and 4 are AoE target, I think is not necessarily confusing. I'm sure people can figure it out, but I wish they went with the more AoE naming from Final Fantasy history. And I actually tweeted that out. I would love to know your thoughts. Because Fire 2 is an AoE and Fire 4 isn't. So there's this weird disparity. That's just my opinion. I'd love to know yours. So generally speaking, they decided to make 3 types of changes. Kind of big changes like Summoner, where he can summon Bahamut now if you do your rotation and you do 2 Dreadworm stances. This is huge. Minor changes and adjustments. And then something where they've actually replaced one system with another. So something like the Warrior's Wrath being changed with the Inner Beast system with the job UI. So those are kind of the 3 core principal changes. And then they decided to go into stat changes. They've talked about parry, and they've decided that it's going to be gone from equipment. The stat's still going to exist at kind of a base core, calculation, but you're not going to have to worry or slot it on your equipment at all. Instead, it's being replaced by a stat called Tenacity. So what Tenacity will do for you, it will increase your base damage and also increase your defense. So it has a dual purpose. It's going to be something extremely valuable. They're also going to change the base calculation damage for tanks back to strength, and because of this, then there's going to be role-specific accessories. So tanks are going to have to equip tank accessories, melee DPS will have to equip melee accessories, and so on and so forth. So that's a big change actually to the accessory system, which was always kind of free form up to now. They're also going to allow you to block and not having it being angle specific. So right now blocking usually happens from the front. Now it looks like you'll be able to block from the sides or perhaps even the back, which I think is a good adjustment that should also help out paladins when there's a lot going on. So they're going to remove accuracy as a base stat to the gear, even though it's going to be a stat that's still in the game. And they said that if your level is even with that of the monster and you're attacking from the front, you're going to see a base accuracy of 100%. From the sides or the back, you could see 110 or 120% accuracy on those positions. You don't need to worry about raids because the inner calculation, even though the monster is very strong, its level is pretty even. But things like blind and various debuffs that could affect your accuracy are going to be more detrimental in this regard, because that's really where you're going to want to have those removed, because again, your base accuracy is pretty much set at 100, and gear is not really going to affect that value. So replacing the accuracy attribute on gear is they're going to have this attribute called direct hit. And what this is, especially along with critical hit, it's basically like a separate critical hit. In fact, both critical and direct hits can happen at the same time. You're going to see real big numbers with lots of exclamation points when both a critical hit and a direct hit happen. I thought this was fascinating, and obviously there's, this is going to be concerning for some. Like, what does this mean? How does this work? Well, we're going to get our hands on it, but apparently it sounds like it's a pretty cool feature, because obviously, yes, you've had a critical hit, but it wasn't direct. But now you have a direct hit, and that's the fact that you can kind of be bouncing between both. And then the fact that you can also stat this in gear seems to be a positive move in my mind. Now, this is interesting, and I don't know how to process it yet, but piety is no longer a main attribute. In fact, it's going to be a sub-attribute. So obviously piety's effects still affect your base level MP, but because it's not a main attribute, you're not going to necessarily be able to slot it. It's not going to have, there's no race that's going to have any effect on it. They brought that up as an example. So I would love to know your thoughts on it. I'm not too concerned because it looked like a lot of the casters had plenty of MP to work with, but at the end of the day, I mean, it seems like an interesting move, and I didn't get too much more details on that at this time. And finally, also, the big news, the big announcement at the end of the live letter was that the jump potions are making their way. You have the story skip potions and you have the job leveling potions, and they detail out all the features that happen with each, as well as the cost. So in American dollars, $25 to skip all the way through to the start of Stormblood, so you get up to Heaven's Word, $18 if you just want to skip a Realm Reborn story, and $25 per job. Now they did say they're going to limit the job jumps to 1 per account, so you're not going to be able to access all the jobs if you have enough money, but still $25 for both the story skip and another $25 for the job jump means to start you're spending an additional $50 on top of the cost of the game just to get up there. So I don't know how you feel about that. I know a lot of people, myself included, are excited that this is an option. I know I'll probably use it on an alternate character just so I have my alternate leveled up just for fun. But I know there are several out there who don't want this and didn't want this, but it is a thing, and in fact it goes on sale June 16th. I know this is going to be controversial, and obviously we can continue to have that discussion, but I think again it's the right move for many reasons, that we'll probably have links to the videos down below that we can continue that discussion. But honestly, I think the price point is right. I think it's not necessarily cheap to where, hey, let me just throw some money at it, but it's, not too expensive to make it just an additional barrier. I think that you'll get 60 gear. The fact that you won't be able to, it won't complete the story for you for Stormblood. It won't put you at level 70. Nobody is going to be able to jump above you currently in the content. They're just going to be able to get to the point where we all are now, if they choose to do that and spend that money. If they don't, they can level just like anybody else. And from that perspective, it ends up, the question is what's cheaper? How quickly does it take you to level to 60? And what's that cost? What's that cost to you, etc. But anyway, and obviously to summarize and finish this video before we go and do the hundreds of other videos that we need to make, they talked about kind of the ground mount changes, and this showed off, and they had the video, and the lion is racing the chicken, and it is flying, and the lion is obviously one of the new tank mounts. So they showed off the 3 new tank mounts as well, and having the 2-speed unlock class just has you just running through super fast, especially when comparing to the normal speed of the mounts. So that was exciting and fun. So they did some announcements at the end of the live letter like they normally do, Chocobo hat and all that, but we're not going to really get into that. This is a long enough video as it is, and I really can't wait to break down all the stuff we learned about the different jobs specifically and jobs video. So I'm going to go do that now. Thanks so much for watching this video. Let me know what you thought if you watched the live letter, or if any of this news is great and exciting, and really what you're really hyped about with Stormblood, and let's have that conversation. We're less than a month away. If you haven't got your pre-orders in, if you get your pre-order in, you can actually play on the 16th of June if you didn't know that. So be sure to check that out. Be sure to check out any of our links below. We've got a shirt on sale till tomorrow before we worry about the June shirt and all that. I just want to thank you so much for watching this video. Sorry that there's a lot of information. Sorry that I honestly think I'm talking really fast, but but even still with all of that, I am so excited, and I'm so thankful that you're here watching us. And you know, hopefully we'll see you in our next video. And again, let's have that conversation, and I hope to see you in my next video. But until next time, have a fantastic week. Take care. Hey, it's me. Thanks so much for watching this video. You should click over here to see more videos just like it, or you should click down here to check out our recent vlog. But you can also click somewhere down here below to hit the subscribe button, as well as check out our other info. Again, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.